Hey Ron, hi. Welcome to today's session.
Hi, Shivani. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for making time for today. Today's session is going to be a mix, not mix, heavily focused on the upcoming technologies, a lot more about AI and ChatGPT, how it's going to change the world of customer success. And before we delve there, please take some time to introduce yourself and help our audience understand the rich experience that you bring to the table.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Yeah, for the last 2.5 years, I've had a consulting business called Hello CCO, where I work with chief customer officers and their post-sale leaders to help them optimize their business, help them improve their operational metrics like retention, their time to value for new customers, and help them generally scale their organizations. And before that, I've had a long career as a post-sale executive working at companies including Intuit, Marketo, RingCentral, and then most recently Gainsight before I started my consulting business. So I've been on the front lines working with customers, and I've also been at the executive level helping to make decisions and strategies for growing organizations. So it's been a lot of fun the last couple of years working with my clients to help them through a variety of different times, some where there's lots of growth, and then in the past year where it's a little bit more challenging. So I'm looking forward to having the conversation today about ChatGPT and AI and how that can be a lever for customer success leaders and other post-sale executives to help them improve their business productivity, drive better outcomes for their customers, and think about their planning for 2024 as that comes up.
Yeah. Now, because you mentioned that's what we're going to talk about. My first question to you, obviously, is that AI has officially entered our office spaces. We don't just talk about it, we are working on it. So as a CS leader, what are your first thoughts on AI's impact on customer success?
Yeah, I think there's so many unknowns about how AI and solutions like ChatGPT will affect businesses in the long term. There's certainly innovations that can be added to many products. There's tools that they can buy. And as I've been working with my clients and talking to so many people in the field, there's been this real focus on what can I be doing now and in the next couple of months to help sort of start to test and start to find ways to innovate in the way that we can deliver better experiences to our customers and improving a lot of our internal processes. So while there's certainly lots going on about where things will look, years from now and all the big changes that are coming, a lot of our leaders have been thinking about like, what can we be doing now to really change what's happening and just start to learn about how we can deliver better support, how we can provide better experiences, how we can improve adoption of our customers, but do it in a more efficient, more scalable way.
Yeah, so that's a great answer. And picking up from where you mentioned better experiences to the customers, that's something I want to discuss a little bit more. Now that we have the support of AI when it comes to communication, how do you think not just the leaders, but also the CSMs and their teams should be leveraging this to personalize the onboarding experience?
Yes. So there has been a lot of concern as I've been talking with customer success leaders and frontline folks about using tools like ChatGPT in their work environment. Some of there have been privacy and legal concerns from their IT organizations about making sure that you're not putting customer information or intellectual property of the companies into ChatGPT. So a lot of what's been happening is trying to find ways that teams can use it in a way that doesn't expose information. There's a little bit of risk aversion. There's that kind of initial hype and then maybe a little bit closed vest. So what I'm encouraging my teams to do is think about ways that you can use it practically without exposing information. And let me give an example. So I have a client that I work with that makes software for large retailers. And their onboarding team was trying to come up with ways to improve their digital onboarding process so that they didn't require as much hand holding. And so we went into, they wanted to come up with a set of email streams that they could send out to new customers that would guide them through the onboarding process and to direct them to resources. And the leader of this team was kind of struggling and had a month-long project plan of what it would take to actually create this email stream. So we went into ChatGPT and described what their situation is. It says, I am the head of implementation at a company that makes this type of software, and we want to create a email stream to send one email over 6 weeks, helping customers through the implementation process. And then we described in week 1, we wanted to do this. In week 2, we wanted to do this. And then you hit enter on the prompt, and it gives you an amazing skeleton to start with of what you could do in each of those different weeks. And then you can say, create a draft of the email. So the idea here isn't that it does your work for you, right? You can't just copy and paste something that comes out. But a lot of times you get stuck on what should I do? And is this going to work? But it gives you a really great draft that you can then take as a first step and then customize it and add to it. And so that's just one example. I try and when I'm working with my clients and we're thinking through let's see what ChatGPT has to say about it. You kind of personalize it a little bit. And then I think people are just shocked at how good it is. And then by saying, hey, tell me a little bit more about this, or, I didn't really mean that. What if it was, explained a little bit better? You get to these really interesting outcomes. So there's lots of examples like that of how you can test it in a way and use it to help innovate and save yourself time in ways that don't expose, customer information or intellectual property.
Correct. And I think when we were having a conversation earlier, you had shared a list of prompts that you have worked on, and they by the way, fetch excellent results from ChatGPT. I tried a few myself. So like the example that you gave, that you put together an email and you're not sure and you just need a starter. ChatGPT does wonders for it. And your material that you're putting together on prompts for ChatGPT, it's excellent help, by the way, excellent help.
Yeah, so when this gets published on YouTube or on LinkedIn, I'll make sure that there's a link to a website that I created that has a summary of strategies for how each of the post-sale functional teams can use things like ChatGPT. So if you're a customer education leader, what are some ideas for how you could use it in your business? If you run a customer success management team, how could you do it? And then there's a whole section that I created with lists of example prompts that you can basically sort of copy and paste and customize for yourself that give you ideas. So that's a start. And my hope is that people will start to experiment with it and find creative ways to make it useful.
Definitely. But when you have technology to support you, why not? Something so exceptional that you had. Thanks for sharing that with us. So moving on, extension of what we are just discussing is personalizing the onboarding experience so you stay in connect. But as we see that more and more companies have a CST, which means that more customers and wider processes, so automation just becomes an integral part of scaling, which means that you might there's a slight chance that this personalization may be missing. So customer success essentially is about building those relationships. So what are your thoughts on using these technologies to make sure that teams are also being nudged in the direction that makes sure that your relationship building works parallelly?
Yes. So when I talk to customer success teams, I'm always listening for how much time they're actually spending talking with customers or interacting directly with customers. Because when you think about what a customer success manager does, there's sometimes like internal work and they're in internal meetings. Sometimes there's preparing presentations or getting prepared for discussions or reviews with customers. Then there's time you're actually talking with customers, either proactively and strategically, and sometimes it's, working with your customers that are struggling in some way or helping to turn them around. So there's a lot of things that pull on an individual's time.
Right.
So I'm hoping that we can all be exploring ways that we can use automation and AI to enable CSMs to spend a higher percentage of their time actually working with customers. I heard a great analogy recently about doctors and how one of the things that doctors really love about their job is interacting with patients, talking with them, really listening. And what they don't like about their jobs is all the time it takes on the administrative side, the entering notes, the gathering information, the doing things to prepare. And that their hope is that AI in the future will take away or decrease the amount of time they need to spend on all of these like non-patient facing interactions, so they can do more of what they love and where they can really add value. And I would love to help our customer success leaders and our chief customer officers over the next year think of ways that we can do the same for our customer facing teams. How can we use AI and ChatGPT and other automation technologies to minimize the amount of time that people need to spend on those non-customer facing tasks, so that the CSMs and other team members can spend the most time like building relationships, providing strategic value, sharing best practices, talking about relevant industry trends directly with those leaders. And so I've started to integrate this into my work with my clients to think about what are the parts of the business that you could be, sort of offloading or doing faster, and then looking for ways that the ChatGPT or other AI tools can ultimately do that. I don't think we're there yet, but those are the types of things that I think about as we plan for 2024.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I really like the way that you've put it together, that because as a customer success team, of course, your primary job is your interaction with the customers and listening to their problems and solving them, and parallelly making sure that what can be automated should be automated using these tools that are coming up. And of course, like you mentioned, that we're not there 100% yet, but with every passing day, of course, we are getting there slowly but surely.
Yeah.
So the next question, please go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please go ahead.
So the next that I want to ask is specifically for the leaders who are in decision-making position. And like you mentioned earlier in the discussion, that they're a little skeptical about data-related issues and how to integrate AI, ML into the tech stack that they already have. But also the leaders deal with a lot of decision making that is based on data, and humongous amount of data. So how should leaders be thinking about customer success leaders, customer success managers maybe, that how to deal with so much data in decision making with the help of these tools, using AI, ML to make sure that decision making is easier?
Yeah. So leaders have, obviously a very challenging job of not only delivering results in their current quarter or their current fiscal year, but also putting in place initiatives that will enable them to scale or grow in the future. And that can often be challenging for customer facing teams because of the almost kind of nonstop, feels like crises every day or week that they're doing. So, one of the ways that data can help is by enabling them to prioritize what are the levers that will have the biggest impact on either their financial business results or their customer experience. And they can do that by like looking at the results of their onboarding process, identifying why customers are staying or churning, taking a look at the knowledge articles or the support tickets that are coming in to see what are the most challenging issues, and then trying to understand what you can be doing to address those key moments that matter.
Okay.
When you think about the impact of AI on those things, going back to the point I made earlier, you want to be able to focus your teams on the customer facing interactions where they add the most value and the areas that have the most impact on the metrics that you may care about most. If you're a customer success leader, maybe it's retention and expansion. If you're an implementation or onboarding leader, maybe it's time to value or sort of the profitability of your business, whatever it is. So, the advice that I give to my clients is, one, get aligned with your executive team and your CFO to understand what are the most important business metrics and outcomes that you and your team need to focus on in the current period and over the future year, because it may not always be obvious, right? Sometimes the company needs you to be able to support an acquisition of another company, or sometimes it needs you to be able to get better experiences for a particular segment of customers, maybe an enterprise segment, because the board cares about growth in that area. So one is really understanding that. Two is finding ways to use AI and ChatGPT and other solutions to improve your team's productivity. I think early on, it will be less about buying new tools and customer facing and more what you can do to affect your team's productivity. What can they do so that they can support customers better, that they can get more done with the same resources? It's likely to be a pretty tough budgeting year. So I'm guessing that most leaders are going to be told, like, hey, your team size stays the same while you support new areas of growth. Yeah. And the third thing that I'd recommend is that rather than starting by exploring like other tools that might be out there in the market, let's start by asking your existing vendors what capabilities they have and what what's on their roadmap for making their products, AI capable. I was just on a call with one of my clients that uses Intercom in their support organization for self-service and chat. And so we got a demo of their new AI tool called Fin that the team could basically turn on instantly and try it out. So Intercom offers a 2-week trial, and you can see how it works. And that's a really low cost, easy way for my client to see, hey, does this change the experience, right? They can try it during off hours without making it into a big deal and see if it helps. That's a very different proposition than going out, interviewing a bunch of other vendors, trying to get budget, implementing it, and then seeing if it works. So I would start with, what are some of the existing companies doing? And how are they thinking about it, so that you start to feel comfortable, you start to understand what's available.
Yeah, I think this answer captures many things in whole, and specifically the part where you're mentioning that companies will now start budgeting, of course, for the fiscal year 2024. I'll come to that in a little later, because earlier you mentioned a few of my favorite things like time to value, adoption, so different aspects of customer journey. And because we've already talked about onboarding just a while ago, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. While onboarding does have a lot of scope to make sure ChatGPT and AI-related tools are used to automate that or even personalize that, how do you see the rest of the journey, the time to value or adoption or renewal being personalized using these tools?
Yeah, so it's so important. Once customers get started using your solution, their teams are just taking advantage of it. And as a customer success manager, perhaps, or even if a business has, customers and you don't have a CSM assigned, you want to make sure that they're understanding the benefits, that they're getting introduced to new features and capabilities. And one of my favorite ways that ChatGPT can be used these days, and it's pretty easy, is to help think through what are some of the automated communications that you can build out to your customers, and what are some of the one-to-many resources that can be used. So, for example, you might have a new feature that you're rolling out to your teams. And rather than having all of your CSMs have to call all of your customers and take them through it, you might have both an email stream that you want to introduce it, and maybe you want to have a webinar about that capability. Right. Well, let's start with the webinar. When I'm working with one of my clients, they recently wanted to plan a webinar. And so we talked about we basically put in a prompt that says, hey, here's what we do. I'm the head of customer success. We're trying to introduce this new capability to our customers in this market. We want to run a 30-minute webinar that introduces them to this new capability. It provides 3 different examples of how they can use it, and it gives them instructions on how to get started.
Right.
And ChatGPT can come back with an outline for that webinar, which again is pretty crazy and can be a skeleton for how you might execute the webinar. And then you can ask ChatGPT, what questions might our customers have during the webinar about this capability, so that it gives you some ideas about topics to integrate into this discussion, or articles or other things that you might add to make it more useful. So doing things like that increases the value and decreases the amount of time that it might take to do these webinars. And you could do the same thing if you were sending out an email from your team introducing a new product or capability.
Right. Yeah, I think to anyone listening to this, the key takeaway, in my opinion, would be that focusing on automation using these tools, because there's so much scope to do that. It's just you need to understand just the basics of using these, even just ChatGPT to begin with, the prompts that you mentioned earlier, and you will be sorted for automating your basic communications at least. That's a great point. And now,
and it makes people better at their jobs. My expectation is that this work is not going to replace the need of a customer success manager or an onboarding resource. You still need that expertise, but you'd much rather have that expertise be focused on what's unique to your business, or building the relationship, or providing strategic value, rather than helping to explain or train on the basics, or provide information that you might be able to get in other ways. So CSMs can, or someone who's running that webinar, responsible for sending out that onboarding email, can enable themselves to do things much more quickly, and potentially even in a better way, because it leverages sort of a world of best practices. And I would imagine the solutions will continue to get better, given that it's still so new.
I agree. And now I would take some time to circle back to what you're mentioning about financial planning. Excuse me for the noise in the background. Now is the time when a lot of teams, companies would start planning their financial year, resource allocation, internal requests. And of course, it looks like it will be a tight year, so a lot of prioritization will have to be done. What do you think we should be telling to those leaders making these very difficult choices this year? How can they rely on AI tools to help sort things out for them?
Yeah, there's 2 different aspects of this. First is how these leaders should think about prioritizing their budget requests to get the resources and investment they need in the business. And the second area is thinking about, well, what are the strategies that you need to put in place to deliver against the goals, whatever your investment is. So let me start with the first one, which is, how should leaders be thinking about their investment requests, asking for more headcount or asking for additional investment in their part of the business? I think this is going to be a very tough year for customer-facing leaders that are asking for additional headcount. Even though they might be able to make a case and says, hey, my team is really busy. If we do this, we're going to get the outcomes. Cash is going to be, so important, and executives and boards are looking for continuously improved profitability in a year where, predicting the future is going to be hard. So there's going to be a lot of conservative budget planning this year, that you're competing for that next $1 million that you want, or additional headcount, with product teams to build out, with sales organizations that want to hire more salespeople, with marketing, with a whole bunch of other resource asks. So you're going to have a very tight business model that if you do make those requests, I would suggest that you focus on how the work that your team is doing contributes to revenue growth, right? Because that's going to be most important for companies of what can you be doing to help expand relationships, increase retention rates, grow add-on services for your business.
Right.
Having a really thoughtful business model is helpful. And so ask your CFO, like, what would they need to see for you to even be able to make the case?
Right.
Second thing is, once you have your resource plan, inevitably you are going to be asked to make your team more productive. It doesn't feel like a year that you're going to get all of the people that you need to build out your education website and take every support case that you have and, have implementations at a really good pace. I think it's going to be a very challenging year. So whatever you're doing, figure out what are the small number of priorities that will help move the needle on the metrics that your business is expected to deliver against most, whether you're sort of a CCO level person or whether you're a functional leader, like a head of support or head of success management. Figure out what those metrics are. And then look for ways. I really do believe that AI and ChatGPT can be and will be a productivity enhancer. Right. And build that into your plan. It's not exactly sure what the world will look like on January 1st or what it will look like next summer, but I do believe that these capabilities will get better. Some of these use cases that I mentioned earlier about, drafting emails or having support responses or writing scripts for webinars or training videos will get more prevalent, and you'll be able to find ways that your teams can do more with less number of people, but in still a very, high quality way. So plan for those and definitely plan to experiment. Even if you don't know what the results will be, take opportunities to experiment, whether it's with your existing vendors or with things that don't put your customer base or intellectual property at risk, right, to see how you can generate these improvements.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to anybody listening. They should probably repeat this answer and listen all over again. Great. Rod, I know we're about touching the time window that we have, but because you have been in the business of customer success for such a long time and with amazing companies with you've worked with, so as somebody who's a CSM and I deal with a lot of operational side of the business, what advice do you have for people making customer success happen to achieve operational excellence?
Yeah, one is be able to communicate to your team how the work that you do contributes to important business results of the company. That's such an important factor in having an individual feel good about their career and being able to get additional opportunities, is to be able to demonstrate how the work that you're doing affects some business metric that the company cares about. And I talk a lot about that in my book of being able to make the connection between the work you do and the outcomes that your business is working on. Second is I would continue to encourage people to try out new things, see what they were, see if they work, talk to your peers to understand their best practices, get involved and listen to podcasts like this and other customer success communities to see what others are doing and bring those best practices back into the business. And when they work, share that with your peers and try to make that your standard operating procedures. And third, continue to seek ways to grow in your career. I'm such a big fan of, taking on stretch roles, challenging yourself, being an aggressive learner. One of the reasons I wrote this book is I felt like there was an opportunity to help people that wanted to be chief customer officers someday, or people that were in that CCO role, have kind of a roadmap for the skills to develop in their career. And so I laid out these sort of 8 skills and strategies that I've seen are important for that. So take opportunities, whether it's reading my book and looking at those frameworks or others of what are the skills that you want to develop? And then find examples, find opportunities to develop those skills. If you want to be a better public speaker, find yourself at events or lead internal discussions about a topic. If you want to be a thought leader, post stuff on LinkedIn or share best practices with your team members so that you get practice doing it. But I'm such a big fan of career development and finding ways to demonstrate skills, even if it doesn't involve a promotion. You're building out your capabilities that will make you more valuable in the future.
Yeah. This has been a great, Rod, and very interesting conversation. You bring to the table everything latest in tech and combining it with customer success. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Shivani. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, feel free to reach out to me from my website at rodcherkas.com. Send me an email. I'd be happy to talk with you. Thanks for having me on your conversation today.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it.